Good evening, everybody. Tonight I will be presenting my latest project using the CDC's NHANES study to predict insulin prescriptions. So just a little background on my data set here. The NHANES study is the health information of approximately 5,000 people. Now, the study has quite a few different data sets in it. What I was interested in is the dietary data set and the medications data set. Now that dietary data set has 168 different questions about people's diets, about their diet, and then the medications lists every medication that they take. So I cleaned the data and formatted it into a new data frame. I encoded whether somebody takes insulin or not in a true-false format, and that was our target variable, the one that we want to try to predict. So the first thing that I did was I predicted insulin prescriptions with all the features, all of the 168 questions. I found that the top features that predicted insulin were if the patient was on a special diet, their sugar consumption, and their caffeine consumption. Just a few notes about those top features. Something I looked into with that special diet, I was curious how the special diet was encoded. And what I found was actually that in this column in particular, the only data that was available was for those that refused to answer the question. And so I thought that was interesting that that would be a top predictor. And then just another note about caffeine consumption. My assumption there is that it's not really the caffeine that's affecting whether people take insulin. I think it probably has more to do with sugary sodas and coffees and energy drinks. I think that is more likely what is predicting insulin prescriptions there. So my recommendation is that we evaluate the diet of the patients that the model falsely predicted an insulin prescription. So if you look in this chart, these are people that the model predicted correctly. And then these are people, these 7 are people that our model predicted that they are on insulin, but they were not. What that's telling me is that they have factors in common with people who take insulin, and it might warrant a visit to their doctor and just ask them about how they might change their diet in order to prevent future insulin prescriptions. So the next thing that I wanted to do is remove what I called cheat features. These are things that we know pretty well that sugar affects your blood glucose level. And so I wanted to remove any features that kind of had to deal with sugar consumption or whether they were on a high sugar or a low sugar diet. I called those cheat features. And I went ahead and removed them. The problem is that even after optimizing our model, it didn't make any correct predictions as far as people who are on insulin. For that reason, I don't think that we can reliably say that this model is predicting that it should be used to predict whether people are on insulin or not. Something that I was disappointed by this, but then I realized that this is really kind of underscoring the importance of sugar in predicting whether somebody takes insulin or not. It's a case of having no result is actually still a result. So the last thing that I wanted to do is look at a drug called glipizide, because insulin is prescribed to both type 1 and type 2 diabetics. So I wanted to look at a prescription that treats only type 2 diabetes. And so I just repeated the process over. The problem is that that data set was even more unbalanced than the insulin data set. And what I mean by that is that of the huge number of prescriptions that were listed, only a very small number of them were glipizide. And that makes it really hard for our algorithm to accurately predict something. So I went ahead and ran it. And I did get a model that did predict glipizide prescriptions. So there are 25 patients who may benefit from talking to their doctor about dietary changes. However, I'm a little hesitant to make recommendations based on this, again, just because the data set is so unbalanced. So this, this study really yields itself to a lot of future work. These were my main ideas, things that could make it better or we could take it farther. I would balance the data using a process called SMOKE. I think it would be interesting to see how that changes our predictions, if it makes them more accurate or not. With the glipizide model, I used an algorithm called k-nearest neighbors, and with that you can't really see which features are the most important. And I think that would be something to look into, if there's a way to see which features were most important to the glipizide model and if they matched up with the insulin model. And then the last thing that I think would be interesting to take a look at is that with this data set, there's huge potential. One of the some of the features that we could have used were diagnosis codes or blood insulin levels. I think it would be interesting not just to do those on their own, but to use everything like in addition to each other, kind of to supplement like what we've learned from the medication. We could supplement that with what we could learn with the blood insulin levels. I just think that would be a really good way to kind of take this further and make it more accurate. And that is the conclusion. I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to any questions.